Lesson 2 with the second Yama, which is Satya. Satya is non-lying, refusing to lie or to go along with lying or lies. Truthfulness. If you look at the nature of the yamas, they are designed to bring more peace of mind to our lives, which has a very practical value because it allows for the functioning of the crown chakra. More of that later. But we saw already with non-violence that we are not aware often of how we are acting and reacting in daily life situations, certain circumstances we find ourselves in. Now, very interesting with the yamas is that very often we violate the principles out of love of ease. Again, we do this subconsciously, but that's human nature. We don't like things to be complicated. We don't like to do lots of effort if we can avoid it. Now, the reason why we commit violence subconsciously is because it seems a quick way out of a situation. And the same applies to untruthfulness or lying. It often seems a quick way to get rid of an inconvenience or to, avoid difficult questions or just we hope that we can make something go away easily. As with violence, when we lie, there are always repercussions. That is just a universal law, the law of cause and effect, or action leading to reaction. And people always, sooner or later, sometimes immediately, find out that we are not being truthful. And you find out with a sense of uneasiness. When I was a child, I come from a big family, 7 children. We were always playing outside. After school, we would come home. We lived on the 5th floor. We would come home, drink a cup of tea, and as soon as possible, we would go down and just play around the house. Very often, we would come home too late for dinner because we like to play and we don't want to stop playing, and we know that we have to go home because it gets dark, because the street lights are being turned on. But you just lose yourself in your play as a child and you come home too late and your mom says, "Where have you been? You know that you have to come home in time for dinner." And of course, you come up with some kind of an excuse like, "I didn't know," and my mom then would say, "But you could have asked somebody who was wearing a watch passing by. You could have asked them the time." And then you say, "No, but there was nobody around with a watch." And then your mom says, "You're lying." Then with your most sincerest face, you say, "No, no, no, it's really true. I'm not lying." And your mom says, "You're lying." And you say, "How do you know that?" And she would say, "It's written over your forehead." The first time she said that, I went to the bathroom, I looked in the mirror, and I came back and I said, "There is nothing on my forehead." And yet you are lying. What she meant is, she just knows, she feels that I was not telling the truth. And I'm telling this as a funny anecdote, but we feel when people lie, because there is a kind of a tension surrounding the person or the situation. And it leaves you with a little bit of a nasty taste in your mouth. There are many repercussions when we find ourselves in situations where there is lying. What happens, I'm not talking about the child and the mom thing, but especially among adults, is when you're confronted with people that lie, you stop trusting them. So it's not only the moment that people lie, but it will carry on into the future. That people, every time, even when you say the truth, they will doubt you. So you lose trust. People do not want to be associated with you anymore. People do not want to cooperate with you anymore. So it has many repercussions. Telling the truth, like trying to avoid engaging in violence on all its levels, requires that we do effort. But the reward of that effort, difficult as it may seem to be, the reward is always considerable. When it comes to non-violence, it helps us to avoid many inconvenient conflicts, which sometimes for days can keep us off balance and disturbed. In case of lying, when you do the effort to tell the truth, and sometimes that also requires, sometimes you have to bring an inconvenient truth. So you have to be a little bit tactful, a little bit diplomatic. But if you put in the effort, it leads to an incredible trust, which makes people want to associate with you. If there is something that they can do, like a business, for example, some kind of venture, they will want to do it with you, because so many people are not truthful, and it's difficult to find reliable people. And you stand out. So it has huge implications, huge repercussions if we violate the principle. Like with non-violence, this is simply a matter of vigilance. Try to be conscious of your feelings. Try to be conscious of your tendency to not be completely truthful when it comes down to it. Because if you pay attention, you will notice the hesitation before you actually say something or do something. And while normal people in their unconsciousness will simply continue in their act, you have a moment of clarity in which you say, hey, I notice what is going on here, what I'm about to do. Let's not do it. Let's see how I can frame this a little bit better and stick to the truth. There are some practical examples. Very often we want to make people feel good by giving them a compliment. Parents do that with their children. Partners do that with their partner. Or you do it with your students, or with friends, people you know. But very often, people give a compliment that is not really true. They will just say, oh, you are so pretty, you are so handsome, or you are so beautiful. The thing is, we all know who we are. And if somebody tells me, you're handsome, then I will scratch my head and say, what does that person need from me? Because I know that I'm bald and I have a crooked nose and, I'm not an example of masculine beauty. The point is, of course, although the compliment was well meant, it leads to an undesirable situation. So we need to do effort. Instead of just using those kind of platitudes like, oh, you are so beautiful, you are so pretty, try to do some effort. Look at that person. What kind of shoes are they wearing? What kind of necktie or earrings or their hairstyle? Or say something nice about something that is actually verifiably true. It will be greatly appreciated because it gives people the impression that you actually paid attention. With children also, we live in a time that a very small family, sometimes only one child in a family. And especially, I've lived in Korea for 26 years and I know a little bit what's going on in society here. In Korea you have the syndrome that is called the princess syndrome. That is children from a one-child family often, sometimes maximum two, who are constantly, from the moment they are born, they're constantly being told how smart they are, how pretty they are, how beautiful they are, how good they are. Everything that they do is being complimented, overloaded with compliments. And again, the intention is good. You want your child to feel empowered, to have confidence, etc. But the thing is, the first couple of years of life, that child, without seeing many other children, gets the impression that they are unique and that they are the only one. But then they go to kindergarten and there are 15 other children in the class. 15 other children who all have been told how amazing they are, how beautiful they are, pretty, handsome, etc., intelligent, smart. And the child, for the first time being with other children, then realizes, I'm not the only one. And it's for a child that is a huge disappointment, a deception almost. So that has huge implications. So the right way to deal with this is to give compliments when warranted. And even then to be a little bit austere. Because the life of a child is very simple. Children do not understand what life is about. But when they grow up, there will be many disappointments. To the point of mental diseases even occurring as a result of having not been properly prepared for a pretty harsh outside world that they sooner or later will be exposed to. Another form of untruthfulness that we are not aware of is identification. Pretending to be something or someone that we are not. We all do this. We grow up, and as teenagers, we have our idols. That can be a pop star, that can be a sports star, somebody that you admire, somebody that you look up to, and when you have these posters in your bedroom of this person, and looking at it gives you a sense of empowerment. That is natural for young people. When you grow up, however, the world is not like that anymore. And people do not really feel attracted towards people who pretend to be something that they are not. I have a kind of an extreme example from my own family situation. I have two younger sisters. They are twins, and they are very popular. They still have dinner. They're in their mid-50s now. They still have dinner with their elementary school teacher, their most favorite teacher. They, as babies, they had lots of attention. Twins always have lots of attention, but blue eyes, blonde hair, girls, lots of attention from everybody, in the street, in the supermarket, in the park, wherever you go. So in high school, in the Netherlands you don't really have high school, you call it secondary education. But anyway, they became part of a huge group of friends, and that group of friends still exists. And the characteristic of this group, especially the boys, is that they all identify with the mafia. When videotapes became available, all of them had the whole series of The Godfather and every other tape in the line of the mafia movies from Mario Pucci. They all, and whenever they visited each other or went to the coffee shop, they would all watch these movies. And I have seen spontaneous, friendly, lovely guys. I have seen them turn into tensed faces, facial expressions, and just kind of wanting to be the characters from the movies that they see. And still, today, they are in such kind of fantasy. Don't get me wrong, they're all wonderful people. But what yoga is about, and that is why Satya is important, is that we connect with our true self, that we develop soul consciousness. And it is those identifications with fantasies that actually make us more disconnected. And the sad reality of this whole group of friends, of which my sisters are part, is that they don't function when they are on their own. They need each other to reinforce their identity. When you would separate them and not allow them to meet anymore, they would become very sad and depressed, because they're now confronted with an empty shell, because there is not the reinforcement anymore of that image that they have lived for the past 35 years or so. So when we are young, we have our idols, but going further into life, it's important that we leave that behind. And one of the most important elements there is, of course, to discover our heart's content so that we can follow our destiny. The Sanskrit word for destiny is dharma. Maybe if you have been a little bit interested in Buddhism, the word dharma is very often heard. In Seoul, there are monks where you can attend what they call a dharma talk, sometimes in English. But dharma, although surrounded by lots of mystery, often is explained as destiny, but people don't understand what that really means, destiny. But the real meaning of dharma actually is essence. And when you connect with your essence, you will find your destiny. You understand that? And it is all those layers of identification that stop most people from ever finding their destiny until they die. And they just have to do it in another life, if they're lucky. The soul is like an onion. That little egg in the middle of the onion is your soul and your true characteristics, your essence, your dharma. But it is surrounded by lots of layers. And because of those layers, you cannot see that little egg in the middle. That is actually the most important. The process of yoga leads to a consciousness, especially when you include the study of these philosophies, a process in which you very naturally start peeling away those layers, and you end up making connection with the heart's content. And many of my students over the years, I have seen them change direction and start doing something they never imagined to be able to do. That is what happens when you follow your heart. And to follow your heart, to follow our hearts, we need to stop keeping ourselves busy with all those identifications. It goes very far. Because in the end, we are all soul consciousness. We all come from the same source, the universal source of universal consciousness. But I am Dutch, and I'm proud of it. When the Dutch soccer team is playing...
Until you play us.
Huh?
Until you play us.
That's exactly what I mean. So I'm Dutch. I'm not only Dutch, I'm from Amsterdam. Amsterdam is the capital. You know, people from Amsterdam say that people from Rotterdam are peasants. Because everything outside of Amsterdam is countryside. They're peasants. That we identify with being from Amsterdam, and we have such a pride because of that. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with this unless you are not conscious of what you are doing. Because this attitude leads to physical harm. Because the Amsterdam soccer team is called Ajax. The Rotterdam soccer team is called PSV. And whenever they have time, the hardcore supporters, we call them, hardcore supporters, hooligans they are also called, whenever they have time, they meet each other and they bash each other's brain in. Based on a fantasy, based on, I am from Amsterdam and you are just a peasant. And the peasant says, I'll show you something. What do you mean I'm just a peasant? Identification with culture, with status. I have a degree, or I have a black belt, or I have whatever. It's not wrong that you are proud of your achievements, etc., as long as you do not separate yourself from other people, because everybody is beautiful in their own ways, and nobody is superior or inferior towards the other. And it is those identifications that kind of set us apart, thinking that we are maybe better than others. Or sometimes we have, if people have mental issues, they can actually do the opposite and start feeling very inferior, leading to depressions and sometimes suicide. So truthfulness is about staying true to yourself. Satya is staying true to your heart. And if you don't know yet what that is, simply start following your feeling, which we already do with asana. It will integrate into your daily life, and based on the discussions that we have here, you will more and more start looking through another prism at daily interactions. And as a result, more and more discover what you truly feel instead of what you have been conditioned to think. From the moment that we are born, we are taught by our parents, by our education, also by our cultural background, by the government that has all kinds of expectations from us. We are kind of conditioned to function in certain ways, to think in certain ways, even though our feeling tells us otherwise. And that is often where things go wrong. To find more harmony, happiness, and also direction towards our own destiny, we need to eliminate all these superficial elements from our lives. And with Satya, you're talking about identifications. If you say to me, oh, Yogacharya Ron, if I do not understand what I'm telling you here, my chest will swell up, and I was like, oh, yeah, are you talking about me? Yeah, I am Yogacharya Ron. No, but I think, oh my God, please don't. I have nothing with titles and all these kind of things. Sometimes you need them for promotion or something, but that's not me. I'm not Yogacharya. I'm not necessarily Dutch or from Amsterdam for that matter. I was born in Amsterdam. I know that feeling very well. But that's a long time ago. I'm a global citizen. And everybody else that I come across, I regard in the same way. And I might have learned something about yoga. Well, you know maybe something about computer technology, of which I know nothing. Now, everybody has their own interests and specialities, and that doesn't set us apart or make us very special. And as a result, if you can approach it in that way, you become better and better at what you are doing. If you can just strip it of all the superficiality, you become a specialist in whatever it is you choose to do, provided that you follow your heart. We will come back to that element later, when we talk about the chakras. Now, another anecdote, when I started teaching the course in a structured way, the first couple of years I was a freelancer and I went from place to place to teach yoga classes. Yoga was almost non-existent when I came to Korea, so I was all over the place basically. But at some point I wanted to settle down and start focusing on teaching real yoga, not just only asana classes. And as soon as I had the opportunity that I had a gym where I could use, like here, I could use the exercise room a couple of times a week, I then started reserving the Saturday for a class that is structured in the way that now this course is structured. And something remarkable happened at some point that I'll never forget and always use as an example here in the subject of truthfulness. And it is when at some point, based on what we are discussing, one of the male students in the room said, I have a colleague who is having affairs with married women, multiple married women. Everybody stays quiet about it, but based on what I'm learning here today, I think I cannot keep quiet about this anymore. And he sounded really kind of indignified. So I said, wait a minute. If you take this in a fanatic way and you say, I have to always speak the truth, you must ask yourself, what are the consequences going to be of what I am about to do? Truthfulness, I said it in the beginning, requires effort, requires sometimes tactfulness, diplomacy. And I told him, if you are going to do what you now feel is the right thing to do, just imagine what happens if you inform the families of these women of the affairs that they have with this colleague. Maybe it will end up in a divorce. The children will become the victim. So do you want to have that on your conscience? So he scratched his head and he said, yeah, now that you're talking about it. So I said, it's not always black and white. If you can do a lot of damage. You can basically violate the first principle of nonviolence by just bluntly being honest. So honesty is not something that you can just throw out everything because your yoga teacher told you so. No, that you have to make a balanced decision based on what you think are going to be the consequences of what you are going to reveal, especially in sensitive case like this. And then, of course, I had an epiphany, and I said, Greg, his name is Greg. I said, with a little smirk on my face, I said, Greg, aren't you also a little bit jealous? I felt his indignation, and I could also feel that, you know, men are men. And when they see that one man, that a colleague or a friend has lots of attention from other women, that might cause some jealousy. And sometimes in our jealousy, we want to do nasty things to just, you know, damage the wonderful thing that they have or think they have. And that was, see, there are many angles from which you can look at it, and it may be a little bit of everything. That brings us to the first of the niyamas, which is purity of motive. So we will talk about that 2 weeks from now. But it all falls into place and it all connects, you will see. Truthfulness in words is respect. Respect for yourself and respect for other people. Always, regardless. What does this mean? Well, when I had a yoga school in Itaewon, I had 2 dogs who were always with me. And one of my yoga members lived just around the corner and also had a dog. So she suggested to go to the riverside to walk our dogs. So she had a car, so why not? Let's go to the riverside, my dog will be happy. And we went there and our dogs were off the leash, and some guy in a uniform, park police or something like that, patrol, came and kind of scolded us. And because I'm a foreigner, he scolded especially her because he knew that she would understand what he was saying. And she was very polite and very, she was almost crawling. It really didn't feel good to me. But what made it worse is that after that we went to have lunch, and the restaurant where we went was a very busy restaurant who had valet parking. So the guy came to park the car, and she was very rude to that guy. I've never spent time with her on the riverside with the dogs or in a restaurant anymore, because I felt it felt really ugly. The humiliation towards the person in uniform, because authority, and then the incredibly rude treatment, insulting treatment, shocking treatment of the person that is going to park her car somewhere, which tells me that she looks at people as inferior and superior. And inferior you can just step on and just insult and do. So that is respect. Respect for everything and everybody. You know, people who have it difficult in life, people in such jobs that do not have much status, those people are struggling. But they're just like you and me. And they have emotions and they have love in their heart, and we are all the same, regardless of age, color, race, culture, nationality, and what have you. We're all, when you cut, you all bleed red. It's only because of cultural things, because of societal things, that we may appear to be different, but we're all the same. And that is what Satya, in the form of respect, is respect to everybody, whether they are manager of a big company or rich, or whether they clean the street or the toilets for that matter. I thought the final paragraph is very important. I underlined the whole paragraph. I will read it to you. Before that, on the last page, you see the basic idea or concept of success in life is always speak the truth and be yourself. Try to be yourself. Express yourself the way you are and not the way you are expected to be, or other people want you to be. Then the criterion to becoming a yogi or yogini is that you function intuitively from the heart. A very important step in achieving that goal is the practice of the yamas, and in particular the practice of sattva. Refuse to live a life dictated by the media, commercials, society, friends, or others. Find your own truth, your own knowledge, your own wisdom. Truthfulness starts with how you interact with the outside world, but very much it applies to how you interact with yourself. And that will help you to discover your heart's content. Sometimes the question comes up, how do I follow my heart? And that has been very difficult for me for years too, but it starts by simply being yourself. When I was a teenager, when I was 13 years old, my parents divorced, and there was not a good situation anyway, because we are the generation from just after the Second World War. My father's whole family was murdered by the Germans. So my father was not like a normal father. And as a child, you're not aware of that. Your father is a god. You look up to your dad. Boys look up to their father. But then he walked off, just like that. There was not in good communication with my mom or anything. He just walked off. Then he came back and he walked off again. Anyway, for a child, this is very traumatic. So for me, that meant I ended up in a very dark place for several years after that. And it disrupted the whole family. Everybody was very badly affected by it. But after a while, I became sick and tired of myself being so unhappy, depressed. I was lost, kind of. As a teenager, it's very easy to be that disrupted. So, in a moment of clarity, I asked myself, if not this, then what do I want? I just consulted with my heart, honestly. If not this, then what do I want instead of it? And the answer was very simple. I just want to be happy. Then the next question came, how do you think you're going to do that? And the answer to that was also very refreshingly simple. Just be yourself. I realized all I had to do was just be myself again. Not to get rich or not to do anything in a material sense to make myself happy. No, just be yourself again. And then I realized that before I ended up in that dark hole, I was a very happy, naive, spontaneous, active young boy. And ever since then, I've been restoring that. And my life really turned around from the day that I started practicing yoga. It's so powerful. And that is also the reason why I stick to the traditional approach. Because all those modern commercial yoga classes are wonderful as an exercise, but they don't offer people transformation, change, taking control. So, without knowing it, my truthfulness started there. Following my heart started there. And yet, if you had asked me at that time, how do you follow your heart? I would not have known the answer. But it starts with following your feeling. Because feeling is very different from thought. We often conflate the two. But what you feel is very often in contradiction with your thought. Your thought is how you are conditioned. Since you were born, you were conditioned. And your thought will tell you something that is often not in line with what you feel, or sometimes even opposite. Satya means the first thing you do is react like you are conditioned to do, but then you say, hey, but what do I really feel? And you realize something that is out of the box, something, a refreshing realizations come as a result of this, that go beyond how you have been conditioned to think and to function. And that is where change starts, unprecedented change. And starts with being honest. Start with yourself. Questions? It's a lot, huh? You have the whole week to digest all this. And digest it will. It happens very naturally. You don't even have to do effort for that. It's just, it will all, you will soak it up and it will all find its place just during normal daily activities, your work or your studies or your care, whatever it is that you do. And if you have questions, you can let me know next week. Okay? Let's have a short break before we go to asana.